So the first speaker that I'm going to invite up is Syed. Ali, how you doing?
I'm very well, James. How are you?
Superb. Excited to have you on board. We've had you on stages. We're soon to have you in a podcast studio, and today we've got you in the webinar. So that's very cool.
Yeah, very excited to be here. Thanks for inviting us in. Today's session is really going to be about, the first session that I have with Grant is to talk about specifically how to build high-performing sales teams in certain economic downturns or in the environment that we see ourselves in today. We see a number of challenges at ZoomInfo, as I'm sure we also hear about a number of challenges from our customers that we're looking to solve through the technology services that we provide, but also as well from a consultancy-led approach about how we do things in our business, given our go-to-market expertise, are specifically around not just about the tools that we have, but also how to use them, and also how to build off the back of that to build those high-performing teams. So, James, we can pull in Grant whenever you're ready.
So, do you want to do that straight away, or do you want me to fire off a few questions first, Ali? Do you want to?
Sure. Feel free to fire off a few questions. Yeah.
So, I'm thinking about your experience from where you're coming out from building successful sales teams. So we've got both of you in there to help with the questionings. Hi, Grant. Great to have you on board.
Great to be here, man. Thank you very much.
You've both got very broad experience working in large companies as well as scale-up companies. So the first question I've got is, can you tell us about your experience building successful sales teams in the past, and what were the key factors that contributed to their success?
Ali, do you want to go first, or shall I?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So I think one of the things that I've learned, it's like there's no perfect art when it comes to creating a highly successful team. Really, what you have to do is, first of all, understand the environment that you're in, that you're operating in, the business that you're with as well. There are going to be certain aspects in that business that would be extremely different to how operations happen in the previous business. So whilst that wealth of knowledge you can bring with you, it doesn't necessarily dictate that what you've seen success with in the past is actually going to deliver success in the future. So you really have to pivot to the times that you're in. So I think that's really, really important. On top of that list, I mean, generally it would be going out to find really, really good salespeople that you'd kind of have a great CV. But actually, my view on this has slightly become nuanced and slightly changed, where actually I really think about culture really, really deeply, and trying to understand the culture that you're trying to build within a sales organization. And then once you kind of have an outline of that, you're then really looking to try and build a skill set off the back of those to be able to enable you to action certain tactics or particular strategies that you're going to market with. And you just build off of that. It's a learning curve on any new area of business that you're looking to lead, whether that's a span of control where you've been promoted to a higher level, or you're going into a new organization. You really need to take each of its component parts to be able to figure out what's right and what's wrong. There is no particular science behind building specific teams, although there are theories that you can use to help you apply those.
What are your thoughts, Grant?
Yeah, thanks. And I got to echo what Syed is saying. I mean, what I would add is, I think connected to that culture really is a belief in what we're all doing, what we're all striving for. So I think as early as possible in the creation of your sales team, if you've got an established business, it's about figuring out who your champion customers are, what their use cases are, and how they derive value. I find if you spend time making sure that value is understood by everybody in the sales team, that you connect that client success team more directly with your sales team, and they understand the points of value, they become more excited, more motivated. They become braver in their approach to prospecting and more confident when they're out there, more situationally fluent when speaking to prospects. And I find that kind of shared view of a mission, and if you can get to the point where the salespeople are more thinking about how their job is to communicate the value that they know customers get, rather than what's just learned in a book or in a presentation slide. And if you can get past that, you can get really a different kind of motivation and a different kind of energy behind your team. And then I would say just thinking about how salespeople tend to think. So the clearer you can make sure that the expectations known for them are, and the more barriers to actually doing business, which is hard enough anyway, especially in this economy. If you can get rid of those barriers and clearly communicate how you're making doing business with your prospects and your customers as seamless as possible, then again, you remove everything that can constitute to demotivation. And so much of what we do as sales leaders is try and drive momentum and build momentum. And that comes from that belief, that culture, and just making sure, every point of inertia that you can control, you try and remove or minimize.
I love that. And I think that expectation management is critical. People need to know where they're at in the organization, especially through this sea of change that's happening all the time. And it's really helpful in terms of structuring that organization. Great responses. Thank you. How do you balance the short-term needs of the business with the long-term goals when developing that sales strategy? And what steps do you take to ensure that the team is focused on achieving both goals, short and long?
Shall I go first this time?
You can go first if you like.
So for me, I think about goals being long-term and strategies and tactics being short-term. So your goal might be that you want to grow your business by 50% next year, and that's the goal for the company. But then you have to get into what are the key strategies, i.e., I need to improve conversion rate by from 20% to 25%. I need to decrease days it takes to close. I need to increase average order value by X%. Those become the strategic things that help you meet those growth goals. And then you need to figure out what the tactical things are, and they become super short-term to improve every single one of those strategic things you're going to do to hit the goal. So goals are long-term. The goal is always there. You're never thinking about that goal. You set that goal and then you think about the strategies to get there and the tactical things that you have to do. And then you'll come down to how do we enable the field to sell better, sell faster? How do we remove process problems? How do we create automation in our selling cycle to do this? How do we review the way that we forecast and predict? So you will then do a bunch of tactical things, and it's the tactical layer which becomes the short term. The goal is always long term. And so really, the seller's not thinking about the goal. They know we have a goal. And then they know that the leaders are trying to figure out the strategies and tactical things, which are then shared goals. So those tactical things, there's an expectation on the sellers. There's an expectation on marketing. There's an expectation on product. Those become shared, unified goals around the organization with the sole mission of making sure that we can grow. So that's the way I think about long-term, short-term. It's actually goals are long-term, strategies and tactics are short-term, and they should be super measurable. And you should always be looking at things and the KPIs that drive towards the goal.
I just want to thank the thoughts that are coming in from Kevin, Ron, and Luke. We will capture those later on in the conversation. But Ali, have you got a response to that, or are you quite satisfied with what Grant has said so far?
Well, I think what Grant said is really insightful, actually. I'd never really thought of strategies in a short-term approach and then kind of separating it and combining it with tactical execution elements and then looking at your goals as a longer-term piece. So I think that's something definitely that I will take away to kind of consider how we can look at that. But just separately on top of that, just to kind of like look at this from a different approach when you look at short-term versus long-term approaches. I think, in any sales organization, revenue solves all problems. And I think where this becomes a challenge, particularly with making sure that your sales teams are efficient, both short-term and long-term, is removing obstacles out of their way. What you tend to find in organizations, or I have historically as well, is that when you're having challenges with delivering outcomes or goals, we become more internal and we focus on reporting internally up the chain, which actually gets you out of the way of the customer, which is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. So one of the things that I tend to do is that, particularly from my senior leadership team, is to try and create a bit of a barrier there when we are going through those challenging times. And, everyone will go through them, whether it's on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, is to remain as that filter to enable my sales team to continue to go to market with the tactical plays that Grant's been talking about, to execute repetitively. And sales, arguably, in the short term, should be really boring. The process should be really boring. The fun part is actually executing on the deals that you close. Like when you can jump up, you can hit the gong, whatever your approach is to when you win a deal and how you celebrate it. Those are the fun tactics that you do in the back end. That's what makes a good salespeople great, is that they have a repeatable motion. And that's the thing that you really want to get across to the rest of the team members as well that are struggling, to be able to help them up that growth curve as well.
It's a hard thing to articulate, but I remember the GM for Europe at LinkedIn had this philosophy about being brilliantly boring. And I was just like, how can you be brilliantly boring? I want to smash my number. I can't be boring, but over the years, it really resonated, and I started to understood what he meant about the mechanics of having brilliance around your process so that you could drive outcome and drive your goal. So very helpful. Just moving on now, how do you identify and prioritize, this is for everyone, key target customers for your sales efforts, and what criteria do you use to determine who you should target first and who is the most important to target?
So I can jump in here first, Grant, if you don't mind. Grant's remit is obviously going to be a much larger span than what I focus on within our international markets. So really for us is that as an emerging business within the EMEA markets, we are looking at various different things. We're looking at historical data. We take the US data to help us understand where we're seeing success and look to see if there's opportunities to replicate that in market as well. So really what you're effectively doing, first of all, is, for us, every single company that has a sales arm in their business is a potential new business customer of ours. So really what we're trying to identify is readiness, willingness, and then the drive to be able to have the integration into the technology services that they need. So we look to really build ICPs around those specific triggers. And, at ZoomInfo, we literally drink our own champagne here. I mean, all of our systems are built off the back of all of the 35,000 odd customers that we have are built off the back of the tools and the services that we go to market with as well. So once we've developed an ICP around, for me, I generally look at the upper mid-market and enterprise segments of our business, is to really look at what those clientele are looking for. What are the problems that they're looking to solve? A lot of the time that's around tech stack consolidation. It's around automation. Those are the areas that we look at, that we talk about, and Mark will go into detail later on, is around our RevOS or Revenue OS platform, and how we're looking to tackle things across a breadth of challenges and not just specific pain points, but looking to consolidate all of those challenges that customers are facing with, and then really create a discovery process around that, consult on it rather than trying to pitch for the pain.
Great response. Thinking about sales teams' motivation, I think Grant will have an answer on this one based on what I've heard about him. And this is away from process, which I know you understand more, Ali, from a technology perspective. It's about the people. Like how do you make the people and have a great culture within a sales organization, so you've got a culture of high performance and continuous improvement in your businesses?
So I think this is where your ability to communicate with your team in a way that remains authentic and remains a dialogue is really critical to how you create that culture. So every single week, I'm speaking to every single rep, not necessarily one-on-one in an organization like mine, but at least in their teams, in their team concepts, in the team constructs, making sure they understand that my job is not a position of hierarchy where you can't find me, you can't get me, that ultimately my job is to make them as successful as possible, and that I share in that success and I'm completely committed to their success. Making sure they always understand what is happening within the business, what's coming next, the things that we are doing to solve the challenges that they've been able to share. And obviously what that means is there needs to be a dialogue in place, i.e. they need to be able to share the things that are holding them back, the things, what would make you twice as successful right now? Where do you find you get most frustrated internally? How much corrupted selling time is there? So these are the questions that I spend my time asking in the field. And then the work of my forecast calls is to figure out what is within our control that I can personally, or somebody else within the senior team or a different department can go remove a block. Can I jump into a call? And once you see that kind of shared responsibility manifesting in actions, not just it's all on the sellers, but actually the whole company is behind our shared view of growth, you tend to drive that better connection with your sales team. They just become more motivated. They see that this is not just them on their own. It does take a village. This is not an easy game that we've all picked. And I don't think there's any seller out there that's worked in the SaaS space for any amount of time that thinks they did it all by themselves. They didn't depend on sales engineers. They didn't depend on legal. They didn't depend on finance at times, executive sponsorship, everything it takes, and obviously a great product with the right innovation curve, everything it takes to sell, making sure that all of the company's muscle is moving in the same direction. That's the single biggest thing that I've found has changed motivation. You have to therefore create the space for that dialogue and make sure that you get credit for what you're actually doing in the back end. So much of what we do, no one sees. And that means the feedback that they gave you 3 months ago, you may have done 6 things that impact that, but you didn't find the time where you actually told the sales team, you told us this, we went and did that. And now it's better because. So don't let the things that we're all working on every day, which are very back office sometimes, the further you get away from that customer, for us as sales leaders, the more miserable it gets. But then you get that, once you see the green shoots and you see the organization becoming more successful, that's where we then get our kicks as leaders. So I think that's the biggest thing I can suggest for motivation. Create the dialogue with your team, be authentic, don't be scared to share your problems and where we're suffering and where we need to get better. And then make sure the things that we implement that you get credit for. Because all too often they just happen, we do them, and they're just sort of brushed under the carpet, and no one ever wants to talk about them again. But they take a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of people. So that's what I would say.